How's it going, my Halloween bakers? Hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're making charcoal ciabattas for all your spooky sandwiches, so let's go to the kitchen, check them out. Halloween is coming up, so I thought it would be a perfect time to use up the charcoal I had left over from previous year's projects. Those being the black sourdough loaf with goji berries and the black burger buns. I will link them down below if you're interested. Activated charcoal was not designed to be food coloring. It is commonly used for medical purposes. It can help alleviate food poisoning. It is perfectly safe to consume and it will not have any negative effects on most people, but it can prevent some medications from being absorbed by the stomach. So if you are on some medication, consult your doctor before you use it. As for it being an ingredient, it is completely odorless and tasteless. So the only thing that it will do to our bread is change its color. So let me show you how this bread is made, starting with the ingredients. We'll need some white bread flour, some whole wheat flour for extra flavor, yeast, salt, some activated charcoal, and some water. That's all we need for this dough. Ciabatta is a very simple bread. We will however use a little bit of olive oil. It'll stop the dough from sticking to the fermentation vessel. But you can of course adjust this recipe. Add some chopped olives or some seeds perhaps. I'll leave those decisions up to you. When it comes to the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and some kind of stencil if you want to give your rolls a unique design. Usually, I bake ciabattas on a preheated baking steel, but this time I have simplified the recipe. We'll do the final proof and the bake on a regular baking sheet. You can of course use a steel or a stone, it's up to you. I wanted to keep it nice and basic this time. A spray bottle of water would come in handy. It'll do a great job at moistening the surface of the rolls. That will not only make them rise better, but also help the stencil stick. But you can probably get away by using a brush too. When it comes to bulk fermentation, I'm going to use my Lloyd's Pans pizza pan. And that is because it's relatively small, rectangular and deep. It will keep the dough in a certain shape, which will make the dough easier to stretch out to the desired shape and to divide. But you can certainly just ferment it in the bowl. A tray like this just makes it slightly more convenient. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's begin. First things first, temperature control. My kitchen is around 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment. So I'm just going to use room temperature water for the dough. Even though we are not going to need this dough, it will warm up by a couple degrees as we mix it. And because I'm aiming for a final dough temperature of around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit, using room temperature water will be the best option. And if you want to learn more about no-knead bread dough temperature control, check out my video about it in the Principles of Baking playlist. Okay, to make the dough, in a bowl, combine the water, yeast, salt, whole wheat flour and activated charcoal. Give it all a mix to dissolve the salt completely. Then add the white bread flour and mix it to a dough. It will be slightly sticky, so you can wet your hands to handle it. Grease the fermentation vessel, be it a tray or a bowl, with a little bit of olive oil. You don't have to use as much as I did in the video, I got a little bit carried away. I always try to give the dough a rough fold after mixing it up. As I hold the dough in my hands, I fold the sides down and then back up into the middle of it. Wet hands really make the job easy. Okay, once everything is done, let's take the temperature just for reference, and we are pretty much dead on. But don't worry if your dough is slightly warmer or cooler, we're going to ferment it in the fridge, so it's going to have time to sort itself out. Okay, so cover the dough and pop it in the fridge for 30 minutes. When it comes to no-knead bread making, folding replaces kneading. So after 30 minutes, take the dough back out to the fridge and give it a fold. And just as earlier, wet your hands with water, then pick the dough up, fold its sides down, then back up into the middle. Keep repeating this as you go around in a circle until the dough ball is nice and tight. This is a technique I've used a few times, and it works pretty well. The main advantage here is that we don't have to mess up the table. In fact, this dough will not touch the table even once in the whole process of making it. This is a very mess-free ciabatta recipe. Okay, once the fold is done, place the dough back into the fridge for another 30 minutes of chilling. And now we're going to give it a second fold. You may argue that the second fold is not totally necessary, but the hydration here is around 75%, so it's not gonna hurt. It doesn't take hardly any more effort either. Perform the second fold exactly the same way as the first one. And now you can leave the dough to cold ferment for around 18 to 24 hours. And this is about how it will look when it's done. It's nice and big, nice and wobbly. The beauty of a ciabatta recipe is its simplicity. Whilst many other breads will require dividing, pre-shaping, resting, and only then final shaping, the ciabatta method combines all these steps in one. So dividing is also final shaping. Dust the dough with flour, release it from the bowl or from the tray using your scraper, and then invert it on a baking tray to avoid making a mess on your table. And dust the other side of dough with flour as well, to make it easier to work with. Stretch it out to a large rectangle, then trim the edges and divide it in 6 equal pieces. Of course, if you don't want to, you don't have to trim the edges. You can leave them a little bit more rustic looking as they are. Remember that at the moment, the smooth side of the dough is on the bottom. So when you place it on your baking tray for final proofing, you have to flip it around so that the smooth side is pointing up. If you're going to trim the edges, as I did, do not discard the trimmings. Simply tear them up into smaller pieces and place them underneath the rolls. They will fuse to the roll, and there won't be any wastage that way. Use a large tray. Make sure the rolls have plenty of space between them. After straightening them out a little bit, they are ready for the final proof. My kitchen is still at around 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit, so the final proof took around an hour and a half for me. If your kitchen is cooler, it will take longer. If it's warmer, it will take less time. Don't forget to preheat the oven to 250 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that is 480 degrees Fahrenheit. When we go to bake the rolls, we'll turn the temperature down slightly. We want the oven to be nice and hot, so when we place the rolls in the oven, they jump up. Okay, final proofing done, we can prep them for baking. Spray or brush the rolls with water, and then apply the stencil of your choice. One of these tea strainers will come in really handy here. Alternatively, use a small sieve. If you don't have either of them, just sprinkle on the flour using your fingers. Be extra careful when you remove the stencil. You don't want any excess flour falling on the roll. Okay, they're all stenciled up and ready for the oven, so let's pop them in there. They will take around 17 minutes to fully bake. As soon as you place them in the oven, turn the temperature down to 220 degrees Celsius or 430 Fahrenheit. You can't really judge readiness by the crust color here, but 17 minutes should definitely do it. And there you have it. That's how I make black ciabatta style bread with some spooky skull stencils. It may look a little bit crazy, but it tastes just like a regular ciabatta roll, and that is what I like about using activated charcoal. It makes the bread look slightly menacing, but when you taste it, it totally catches you off guard, because it tastes no different from regular bread. And this is certainly a great example of a nice cold fermented ciabatta roll. It has a thin crust, a nice chewy crumb, and a great flavor from the added whole wheat flour and the long cold fermentation. But wait, there is more. We are not done yet. We'll make another bread using the same dough. This has been fermented in the fridge for around 18 hours. It is slightly smaller than the previous one. That's because it was slightly cooler when I made it, and I pulled it out of the fridge a little bit sooner. But that is totally fine. The end result will still be the same. What we are making is focaccia. Place the dough on a non-stick paper lined baking tray. You could pour some oil on the paper if you wanted to. It would make the bread easier to handle and will make it richer too. Or whatever you do, stretch the dough out, cover it up and leave it for the final proof, which will also take around an hour and a half, just like the ciabatta dough. After proofing, add the toppings of your choice. I've got some tomatoes, feta cheese, oregano, olive oil and a sprinkling of sea salt here. To ensure that the toppings stick and don't fall off, press them right down into the tray. The baking temperature will be exactly the same as for the ciabatta, but the focaccia will take slightly longer, at around 25 minutes. And that is it. That's how easy it is to make focaccia out of the same dough as ciabatta. And if you want to, you can of course make some black pizzas with this. We even place it in a tin and make a loaf. It is a very basic and a very versatile dough. And no matter what you do with it, you'll get great results. When it comes to using charcoal, there are no special steps needed. You could take any bread dough recipe, add a bit of charcoal to turn it black, and that is it. I usually go for 2% when it comes to baker's percentage. So my dough will contain equal amounts of salt and charcoal. That way, I don't have to do any calculations. I simply look at the salt content of a bread dough recipe and add the same amount of charcoal to it. It will be great to see some of your charcoal creations on our Flickr group. You'll find it linked down below the video. So what do you think this recipe? Have you ever used charcoal in bread making before? Let me know down in the comments. You want to see more videos like this one? Click over here. Subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.